Hello everyone. Today, I'll continue sharing with you the story of the single mother Tusan. I hope you enjoy the video. Since learning more about Trang's circumstances, Tusan could no longer remain as calm as before. The fragments of stories Trang had shared that day kept returning to her mind, not loud, not dramatic, yet heavy enough to make anyone fall silent. A young woman living quietly, carrying too many worries on her shoulders, loving in silence, cautiously to the point of withdrawing into herself. Tusan felt both compassion and concern. She felt compassion for Trang, for loving yet not daring to hold on, for constantly stepping back out of fear of becoming a burden to others. And she felt worried, because she understood that people like Trang, if not gently pulled out of their own fear, could easily lose happiness even when it was right within reach. That evening, after the two children had fallen asleep, Tusan finally told Hai everything. She added nothing, passed no judgment, she simply shared what she felt, in a slow, steady voice. Hai listened for a long time without interrupting. He realized that his feelings were exactly the same as Tusan's. Not only because he felt sorry for Trang, but because in her story, Hai saw a piece of his own past, memories of his mother, and of the close bond she once shared with Ton's mother. Two women who used to sit together for hours over tea, who understood each other without many words, who shared even the most delicate worries about their children. Hai sighed softly. I understand why you're worried. Trang isn't someone who doesn't dare to love, she's someone who's afraid that her love won't be strong enough to overcome what lies ahead. Tusan turned to look at him, her gaze softening. I'm just afraid, if things continue like this, both Ton and Trang will end up exhausted. After a moment of silence, Hai spoke again, his voice slow, but firm. Let me try asking my mom. Tusan was slightly surprised, but she didn't stop him. Hai explained that his mother and Ton's mother shared enough trust and closeness to talk without making anyone feel pressured. Not advice delivered forcefully, and certainly not control, just a conversation between two mothers who had lived long enough to understand each other's fears and sacrifices for their children. If there's anyone who might get Ton's mom to open her heart, Hai said, it would be my mother. Tusan nodded, a small but clear spark of hope rising inside her. She knew that some knots couldn't be untied by logic, they required empathy, from the right person, at the right moment. That night, Tusan didn't fall asleep right away. She thought about Trang, about the eyes that always avoided the future. She thought about Ton, a quiet man, patient to the point of silently enduring everything. And suddenly, she understood. Sometimes love isn't lacking, what's missing is a gentle enough hand to push open the door of fear. While Tusan and Hai were trying to untangle things from the family side, elsewhere in the city, Ton was struggling with a much heavier reality. His mother did not accept it. No shouting, no harsh prohibitions, but that cold, distant silence made it even harder for Ton to breathe. She didn't come to the hospital. She didn't ask after Trang. Just one short sentence. You chose this yourself, so take responsibility for it. Ton understood, and that understanding hurt deeply. With no other option, he quietly rented a small house near the hospital. It wasn't big or new, but it was clean and quiet, enough for Trang to rest after giving birth. On the day he brought her home from the hospital, Ton arrived far earlier than needed, standing in the hallway with his hands tightly clasped, his heart filled with worry and guilt. Trang stepped out, her face pale, her movements slow. Seeing the modest rented house, seeing the anxiety in every small gesture of Ton's, she understood everything, without him needing to explain. After setting down her bag, Ton stood still for a moment before speaking, his voice hoarse. I'm sorry. You shouldn't have to go through this. You just gave birth. Trang looked up at him. Her eyes were tired, but gentle. I understand, Ton. She shook her head softly, as if to stop him from blaming himself. You're in a difficult position too. That was the moment Ton could no longer hold it in. The pressure, guilt, and helplessness he'd been suppressing for days finally broke free. He stepped forward and pulled Trang into a careful, gentle embrace, as if afraid of hurting her. Trang leaned against his chest. Tears fell quietly, not from resentment, but from exhaustion and loneliness. Yet in that embrace, there was no blame, only two people trying to lean on each other to stay standing. "Everything will be okay," Trang whispered, her voice trembling but firm. "As long as we don't let go of each other." Tone tightened his arm slightly and took a deep breath. "I promise. No matter how long it takes. I won't let you and our child face this alone." The small house fell silent, filled only with the sound of their breathing. Outside, life was still full of barriers, but in that moment, they knew at least one thing: they still had each other. That afternoon, Hai's mother went to visit Tone's mother without giving notice. She didn't bring elaborate gifts, just a simple basket of fruit and a bag of freshly made porridge, still warm. She paused briefly at the gate, took a deep breath as if preparing herself, then stepped inside. Tone's mother was surprised to see her. The two women looked at each other for a few seconds, long enough to notice the new wrinkles at the corners of each other's eyes. "I came by to visit," Hai's mother said gently. "It's been a long time since we sat together." The atmosphere was slightly awkward at first. Tone's mother poured tea, setting the cup down with slow, cautious movements. But Hai's mother didn't rush into the topic. She glanced around the house, at the family photo on the wall, and smiled faintly. "We used to sit right here," she said quietly. "Drinking tea, talking about our kids, sometimes until nightfall." A brief silence passed. Old memories surfaced naturally, even though neither had deliberately mentioned them. Hai's mother set her teacup down first. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but because what she was about to say came from deep within her heart. "I didn't come today to blame you." Tone's mother looked up, a trace of caution in her eyes. "I just want to tell you a story," she continued carefully. "Back then, I almost lost my daughter-in-law." The words made Tone's mother freeze. "At the time, I thought I was right," Hai's mother went on, her voice slow but clear. "I thought being a mother meant choosing what was best for my child. Protecting reputation. Upholding standards. I didn't listen, didn't ask, I only imposed my will." She sighed softly. "It wasn't until my son moved out that I realized, the one who hurt the most wasn't me, it was him." The room grew quiet. Tone's mother clenched her hands on her lap. Hai's mother looked at her directly, no pressure, no raised voice, just the gaze of someone who had lived through her own mistakes. "There were times I asked myself, was I protecting my child, or pushing him farther away?" The sentence landed softly, yet heavily enough that Tone's mother couldn't avoid it. She turned her face away, her eyes reddening. After a long while, she spoke in a low, hoarse voice. "I don't hate the girl. I'm just afraid she'll make Tone suffer." Hai's mother nodded. "I understand. But sometimes, it's our refusal that hurts our children the most." Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. Inside the old house, two mothers sat facing each other, no longer on opposite sides, but as two sisters sharing the same fear, the fear of seeing their children in pain. Tone's mother lowered her head for a long time. Then she said, almost in a whisper, "Let me think about it." Just that one sentence, but to Hai's mother, it was a door finally beginning to open. She didn't push further, only nodded gently and placed her hand over the other woman's. "Take your time. I believe you love your child very much." The afternoon passed slowly. There was no immediate reconciliation, no clear promises, but inside Tone's mother, something had begun to shift. And that was the first step. Meanwhile, at the small rented house, another afternoon was unfolding, filled with unease and uncertainty. Tusan and Hai arrived to visit Trang just as she had put the baby to sleep. The house was quiet, carrying the faint scent of milk. Trang looked thinner than the last time they'd seen her, dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights, yet she still tried to smile when she saw Tusan. "I'm fine," Trang said out of habit. But Tusan could tell, that was the sentence of someone who had been tired for far too long. Tusan sat beside her, asking gently, little by little. Nothing big, just whether she was eating enough, whether the baby slept well at night, whether she was still in pain. Simple questions, yet enough to make Trang's throat tighten. With Tone here, it's easier, Trang said softly. It's just that, sometimes I feel like I put him in a difficult position. Tusan placed her hand over Trang's and spoke gently. Don't carry everything on your own. Some things aren't your fault. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Tone went to open it. The landlord stood there, not angry, but firm. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, yet it was enough to make the air inside the house grow heavy. The landlord wanted the house back sooner. Not out of hostility, not because of conflict, they needed to renovate it for long-term rental. Only a few days remained. When the door closed, Tone stood still. Trang sat frozen, gripping the edge of the blanket. She had just given birth, her body still weak, her thoughts spinning. The question, where will I go, tightened her chest. Tusan didn't hesitate for a single second. Trang, she called softly. If you don't mind, come stay at my place for now. Trang looked up, stunned. But, me and the baby. I have space, Tusan cut in gently, but firmly. There are people, children, warmth, so you won't be alone. Hai stood beside her and nodded immediately. Come stay with us. With Tusan and the kids, it'll be easier to breathe. Trang burst into tears. Not from weakness, but because for the first time after giving birth, she felt chosen, protected, without the weight of indebtedness. Tone bowed his head deeply. Thank you. His voice broke, unable to continue. Tusan simply shook her head. Between people, there's no need for that. That evening, Trang carried her baby home with Tusan. The familiar house lit up warmly, filled with children's voices and the scent of hot rice from the kitchen. Not large, not luxurious, but warm enough to make someone feel welcomed. Tusan had already prepared a corner of the room, arranging everything carefully, as if Trang had long been part of the family. Trang looked around, tears falling again, this time, tears of relief. Outside, the obstacles had not disappeared. But in that moment, she knew one thing for sure. At least tonight, she and her child had a place to return to. Tusan temporarily brought Trang and her baby back to her own home to look after them. She didn't call it a long-term solution, she only said gently. Stay here for now. When things feel more stable, we'll figure out the next step. Trang understood. And strangely, it was that lack of promises that made her feel safer. In Tusan's home, no one asked too much. No one looked at her with curiosity or pity. There were only hot meals, and small, simple questions. Are you in less pain today? Did the baby sleep last night, just enough to make a woman who had just given birth feel like she was still a person, not a burden? Meanwhile, at Tone's mother's house, a very long evening passed in silence. Hai had spoken to her. Not harshly, not accusingly, just honest, straightforward words that still didn't feel heavy. Auntie. I know you love Tone. But have you ever thought, if he has to choose between his mother and the person he wants to protect, then the one who will hurt the most is him, won't it be? That sentence kept Tone's mother awake all night. Truthfully, she didn't hate Trang. On the contrary, she even liked her gentleness, liked how she always kept a respectful distance, never once behaved inappropriately. She knew Trang had endured many hardships, knew she had given birth under difficult circumstances. But there was one thing she couldn't get past. The baby was not her son's blood. In her mind, raising a child who didn't carry the family bloodline was something almost impossible to accept. She was afraid her son would sacrifice his whole life for someone else's child, afraid love would eventually turn into obligation, afraid that one day Tone would realize he had carried a weight that was never meant to be his. Suffering for your own child is one thing, she had once thought. But raising someone else's grandchild, how could anyone truly accept that? Yet the more she thought, the more conflicted she became. Because whenever she remembered Tone's eyes, tired, yet unwavering, she knew her son had already chosen. Not out of impulse, but with clear awareness. She remembered what Hai's mother had said that day. Sometimes it's not that you don't love the child, it's that you're hurting your own son. That line kept repeating in her head. Tone's mother sat alone in the living room, staring at the empty chair across from her, the chair where Tone used to sit. For the first time, she asked herself, if I keep holding on to this belief, am I pushing my own son farther away? She wasn't ready to open the door and welcome Trang and the baby. She didn't have the courage to call the child her grandchild. But inside her, the hardness she'd begun with was no longer intact. At the very least, she had started to think. And sometimes, for a mother who has lived her whole life by rules and propriety, simply allowing herself to reconsider, even that, is already a tremendous step. That afternoon, Tone's mother came to Tusan's house, yet she didn't go in. She stopped across the narrow road, standing half-hidden behind a low fence. The sun was lowering, the light softer now, enough to see clearly inside without being too harsh. From a distance, she saw Tusan holding the baby, gently rocking. The baby's faint crying slowly quieted. A moment later, Trang appeared. She moved slowly, still weak after childbirth. When Tusan handed the baby back, Trang received the child with emotion that was instinctive and familiar, careful, protective, filled with sheltering love. She bent down and whispered something into the baby's ear, too softly for anyone far away to hear, but the tenderness was obvious. Tone's mother stood frozen. She did not see a calculating woman, nor someone clinging for advantage. What she saw was a mother, awkward, exhausted, yet holding her baby with everything she had. The baby lay quietly in Trang's arms, tiny fingers gripping the hem of her shirt. A very light grip, yet it made the heart feel unbearably heavy. Without realizing it, Tone's mother stepped forward half a step, then stopped. She was afraid that if she came any closer, everything inside her would crack open. Afraid she would soften. Afraid that the baby's presence would dissolve the boundaries she'd built for so long. She turned away before anyone could notice. At the same time, inside the house, Trang suddenly felt her heart sink. She didn't know why, but she had the sense that someone had been watching her for a long time. Trang didn't turn around, she only tightened her hold on the baby. She knew. She knew Tone's mother still hadn't accepted them. Tusan said nothing, but some things don't need words. Trang had never blamed anyone. She only felt sad for Tone, because he was standing between two sides that were both flesh and blood and responsibility. That night, when Tone came by to see the two of them, Trang spoke very softly. I'm not angry. I understand, your mother needs time. Tone looked at her, his eyes reddening. I'm afraid you'll feel humiliated, or hurt. Trang shook her head and gave him a very thin smile. If it were me. I'm not even sure I would do better than your mother. That sentence left Tone speechless. Trang didn't resent anyone, and she didn't expect acceptance immediately. For her right now, as long as Tone was still there, still choosing to stay by her and the baby, that was enough to keep trying. Outside the porch, the night wind drifted softly. Somewhere not far away, Tone's mother sat alone in her familiar house. She kept remembering that tiny hand, and Trang's concentrated, careful gaze as she held the baby. She still couldn't call the child her grandchild. But she was no longer certain she could keep ignoring them forever. And sometimes, a mother's hesitation is the very first sign of change. The days at Tusan's house passed slowly, and more peacefully than Trang had expected. Tusan cared for her with great attentiveness, without noise, without making Trang feel like someone who needed special treatment. Everything was simply, just enough, hot porridge at the right hour, a warm glass of water already placed on the table, Tusan taking the baby so Trang could doze a little longer. That gentleness made Trang's nose sting again and again. One noon, when the baby had just fallen soundly asleep, the house was so quiet you could hear the fan turning steadily. Trang suddenly spoke. Her voice was slow, hesitant, as if she had thought about it for a long time before daring to say it. Tusan. Trang lowered her head, fingers tightly interlaced. There's something I've always felt guilty about. Tusan looked up at her, not rushing her, only waiting. Back then, When you were still my sister-in-law, Trang continued, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't treat you well. Sometimes I even said very hurtful things. I know I was selfish and shallow. At that point, Trang choked up. Now that I think back, I feel like I was terrible. Tusan stayed silent for a few seconds. Then she smiled, a very soft smile, not forced, not resentful. She poured more water and slid the cup toward Trang, as if to help her calm down. That's in the past now, Tusan said gently. Everyone has moments of being wrong, especially when we're young and haven't yet understood people's hearts. Trang looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. But I still feel so ashamed. Tusan placed her hand over Trang's. The touch was warm and steady. I don't keep things that make my heart heavy. Then she glanced at the sleeping baby, her gaze softening completely. Now I only hope you can be happy, with Tone, and with your child. Trang broke down in tears. Not from self-pity, but because for the first time she truly felt real forgiveness, something that didn't need to reopen the past to prove itself. I'll try, Trang sobbed. I'll try to live well, so I won't betray the love of those who have been kind to me. Tusan nodded, still wearing that same gentle smile. As long as you're kind to yourself, that's enough. Outside, midday sunlight slipped through the window, falling softly onto the floor. In that small room, two women who once stood in very different places in each other's lives now sat side by side, no distance left between them, only quiet understanding. Tone's mother came to see Trang on a morning without warning. She stood at Tusan's gate for quite a while before stepping in. When she saw Trang holding the baby in the living room, she paused, a tiny, brief pause, like an instinct even she didn't want to admit. Trang stood up to greet her, respectful as always. She could guess why the woman had come, yet she still invited her to sit, poured tea, her hands trembling slightly. Without circling around, Tone's mother went straight to the point. I came today, she said, her voice low and slow. Because I want to speak clearly with you. Trang nodded slightly, holding the baby closer. This child. Tone's mother hesitated, as if wrestling with herself. He's not Tone's biological child. I know it hurts to say it, but I have to. The air in the room sank. This is what I think, she continued, meeting Trang's gaze. You're still young. If you leave this child at an orphanage, and then later have a child with Tone, I will accept your marriage. The words fell like a blade. Trang went numb. She didn't cry immediately. She only looked down at her baby, sleeping peacefully in her arms, breathing evenly, a small innocent face that made her heart tighten. I can't, Trang said, very softly but clearly. I can't leave my child. Tone's mother frowned. You have to think about the future. Think about Tone. This child is not his responsibility. Trang lifted her head. There was no hatred in her eyes, only deep pain. But he is my child, she said, her voice trembling. I can't bear it. Even thinking about it. I can't do it. A heavy silence swallowed the room. I don't expect you to love him, Trang continued, tears falling slowly. I don't even dare hope you'll see him as family. But please don't force me to abandon my own child. For the first time, Tone's mother turned her face away. She hadn't expected Trang to be that calm. No begging. No accusations. No rebellion. Only a deep, instinctive firmness that belonged to a mother. I'm sorry, Trang added, bowing her head. If because of me Tone has to be torn apart, I will leave. But I cannot leave my child. That line shook Tone's mother to the core. She had come believing she was offering a solution. But faced with Trang's clear choice, she suddenly realized, there are things that cannot be traded, no matter how reasonable the conditions may sound. She stood up. I need time to think, she said, sounding more tired than when she arrived. This isn't simple. After she left, Trang collapsed onto the chair, clutching her baby, crying soundlessly. Tusan came out from the kitchen. She didn't ask anything, she only sat down beside Trang and placed a hand on her shoulder. You did the right thing, Tusan whispered. No mother can abandon her child, just to exchange it for marriage. Trang leaned into Tusan's shoulder, sobbing. I don't know what will happen, but I don't regret it. Tusan squeezed her shoulder gently. As long as you don't betray yourself, no matter how hard the road is, you'll still be able to walk it. Outside, the sun was still rising. Life still held many boundaries that hadn't been untied. But in that moment, Trang knew one thing with certainty. She might lose many things, but she would never lose her child. Tusan learned the truth that evening. He didn't hear it from his mother, but from Trang herself. She didn't go into detail, she only said it briefly, softly, as if afraid that saying more would shatter her. Your mother wanted me to give my child away. And then, have a baby with you. After saying that, Trang lowered her head, holding the sleeping baby tightly. She wasn't crying, but her whole body trembled. She was afraid, not of being abandoned, but of becoming the burden that forced Tusan to choose. Tusan stayed silent for a long time. He sat down in front of Trang and looked closely at the baby, such a tiny face, strangely peaceful. Then he looked up, his voice low but steady. How did you answer? Trang didn't look at him. I said, I couldn't leave my child. Tusan nodded, without a trace of hesitation. You answered right. Trang froze and looked up at him. Trang, Tusan continued, each word slow and clear. I don't know what others think. But for me, this baby is your child. And you are the person I chose. Tears fell from Trang's eyes, this time she couldn't hold them back. Tusan lifted a hand and wiped them away gently, as if afraid to hurt her. I accept your child. Not because it's my duty, not because anyone forced me to. But because I want to. He placed his hand on the baby's back, his voice softening. I will treat this child as my own. I will be here, raise him, teach him to call me dad, if one day he wants to. Trang broke down in sobs. She had prepared herself for every possibility, rejection, abandonment, sacrifice. She had never imagined she would be chosen so clearly. Aren't you afraid? Trang choked out. He's not your biological child. Tusan shook his head. I'm only afraid of one thing, afraid you and the baby will have to keep going without me. He pulled Trang into his arms, holding her tightly. I don't need you to choose between me and your child. Because to me, the two of you are one. In the quiet house, the baby shifted slightly, stirred, then fell asleep again. Outside, the world still held many eyes and many judgments. But in that embrace, Trang felt, perhaps for the first time, that she was no longer alone. And somewhere else, Tusan's mother sat silently in her familiar room. For the first time in her life, she understood. Her son had grown up. Not by obeying, but by taking full responsibility for his own choice.
Xin chào mọi người. Cảm ơn mọi người đã lắng nghe hết câu chuyện hôm nay mà mình chia sẻ. Hy vọng rằng mọi người sẽ yêu thích câu chuyện ngày hôm nay. Và kênh của mình thì hiện tại đang kể câu chuyện về người mẹ đơn thân Lý Tiểu San và người mẹ đơn thân Lý Hoai ca. Nếu mà mọi người yêu thích những câu chuyện mà mình chia sẻ thì nhớ bấm like, share và chuông thông báo để nhận thông báo khi mình đăng video mới nhất nha. Cảm ơn mọi người đã lắng nghe và ủng hộ kênh của mình trong suốt thời gian vừa qua. Hy vọng rằng mọi người vẫn sẽ yêu thích và đồng hành cùng mình trong thời gian sắp tới. Và cũng như ủng hộ kênh cho mình, để lại một số nhận xét ở dưới phần bình luận để mình có động lực ra nhiều video hay hơn. Và cảm ơn mọi người đã lắng nghe một phút chia sẻ ở cuối video. Hẹn gặp lại mọi người ở trong những video tiếp theo nha.